Marcus Bickers stepped out of his shiny black Mercedes, adjusting his expensive gold watch as he looked around the quiet Beverly Hills neighborhood. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns, and Marcus felt that familiar surge of satisfaction that came from knowing he belonged in this exclusive area. His tailored Italian suit hugged his frame perfectly, and his leather shoes clicked confidently against the sidewalk as he began his leisurely walk home. At 42 years old, Marcus had built his fortune selling luxury cars to wealthy clients who valued status over substance. He had learned early in life that appearances mattered more than character, and he had spent years crafting an image of success and superiority. His dealership catered to celebrities, business moguls, and anyone else with enough money to afford his overpriced vehicles. Marcus took pride in being able to manipulate his customers, convincing them they needed the most expensive options available. As he walked down Maple Street, Marcus noticed how perfectly maintained everything appeared. The houses stood like monuments to wealth, each one trying to outdo its neighbors in grandeur and excess. This was exactly the kind of environment where Marcus thrived. He enjoyed being surrounded by luxury and status symbols because they reflected his own perceived importance in the world. The neighborhood was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Most residents were probably at work or attending their various social obligations. Marcus preferred it this way because it gave him time to appreciate his surroundings without having to engage in meaningless small talk with neighbors he considered beneath his notice. He had never been one for genuine friendships or community involvement. Instead, he viewed relationships as transactions where he could gain some advantage or entertainment. Marcus had always possessed a cruel streak that he disguised behind his charming businessman facade. Even as a child, he'd found amusement in the discomfort of others. He would pull wings off flies, knock down smaller children on the playground, and spread rumors that would hurt his classmates. His parents had been too busy with their own careers to notice or correct this behavior, so Marcus had grown into adulthood believing that causing pain to others was simply another form of entertainment. His success in business had only reinforced these tendencies. Marcus had discovered that he could manipulate people through intimidation, condescension, and emotional manipulation. He would find his customers' weaknesses and exploit them to make sales. If someone seemed uncertain about a purchase, Marcus would make them feel foolish for hesitating. If they appeared to have financial concerns, he would suggest that perhaps they were not sophisticated enough to appreciate quality. As Marcus continued his walk, he passed several beautiful homes with well-maintained gardens and expensive cars parked in circular driveways. Each property represented millions of dollars in real estate, and Marcus felt proud to call this area his home. He had worked hard to afford his place here, though his definition of hard work involved stepping on others rather than honest effort and dedication. The businessman carried himself with an air of superiority that was evident in every gesture. His shoulders were thrown back, his chin held high, and his eyes swept over his surroundings with the look of someone surveying his domain. Marcus believed that his wealth and success gave him the right to look down on others, and he exercised this perceived privilege whenever possible. Today had been particularly profitable at the dealership. Marcus had convinced a young tech entrepreneur to purchase not just one luxury vehicle, but 3 different models for his collection. The young man had clearly been trying to impress a woman, and Marcus had expertly played on his insecurities to inflate the sale price dramatically. The commission from this single transaction would cover Marcus's mortgage payment for the next 2 months. The memory of that successful manipulation brought a satisfied smile to Marcus's face as he walked. He enjoyed recalling the moment when his customer had realized he was spending far more than he had intended, but felt too embarrassed to back down. Marcus had learned that pride was often the most expensive emotion, and he had built his career on exploiting that human weakness. As he turned the corner onto Oakwood Avenue, Marcus noticed a small pocket park that he had never paid attention to before. The area was beautifully landscaped with mature oak trees, colorful flower beds, and a perfectly maintained grass area. It was the kind of amenity that justified the high property values in this neighborhood, though Marcus had never stopped to appreciate it before. What caught his attention today were two dogs playing freely in the open space. They appeared to be without supervision, running and playing together in a way that suggested they were comfortable and familiar with the area. One was a magnificent golden retriever with a coat that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. The other was a powerful-looking German shepherd with intelligent eyes and perfect posture. Both animals were clearly well cared for and expensive breeds. Their coats were glossy and well-groomed, their movements confident and healthy. They wore quality leather collars that probably cost more than most people spent on their own accessories. These were not stray animals or neglected pets, but obviously beloved companions who belonged to someone with both money and good taste. Marcus stopped walking and watched the dogs play. They were completely absorbed in their game, chasing each other in circles, rolling in the grass, and engaging in the kind of innocent fun that only animals seemed capable of achieving. There was something pure and joyful about their interaction that most humans had lost somewhere along the path to adulthood. For a brief moment, Marcus felt something that might have been appreciation for the simple beauty of the scene. The dogs were not concerned with status or wealth or appearance. They were simply enjoying the moment and each other's company in a way that was both touching and enviable. But this moment of potential softness was quickly overwhelmed by a much darker impulse. Looking around the quiet park area, Marcus realized that no owner was visible anywhere nearby. The dogs appeared to be unsupervised, at least temporarily. This observation triggered something malicious in Marcus's mind, a familiar urge to disrupt peace and happiness simply because he could. The same cruel instinct that had driven him to torment others throughout his life began to stir as he watched these innocent animals. Marcus glanced around again to make sure he was truly alone with the dogs. The park was empty except for the three of them, and the surrounding houses showed no signs of anyone watching from windows or yards. This perceived privacy gave Marcus the confidence to consider acting on his impulses without immediate consequences. The businessman set down his leather briefcase and loosened his tie slightly, as if preparing for some kind of physical activity. His eyes fixed on the playing dogs with a calculating expression that would have alarmed anyone who understood his intentions. Marcus began looking around the ground near his feet, searching for something that would serve his cruel purpose. The afternoon remained peaceful and quiet, with only the sound of the dogs playing and the distant hum of traffic from the main street. Neither of the animals had noticed Marcus yet, as they were too absorbed in their innocent game to pay attention to the well-dressed man who was planning to shatter their peaceful afternoon for no reason other than his own twisted amusement. Marcus bent down and picked up a smooth stone about the size of a golf ball from the decorative rock border that lined the park's flower beds. The stone felt heavy and solid in his palm, perfect for what he had in mind. He weighed it thoughtfully, testing its balance while watching the two dogs continue their innocent play. A twisted smile spread across his face as he imagined the chaos he was about to create. The golden retriever had paused in its running and was now sniffing around a patch of flowers, its tail wagging contentedly. The dog was completely unaware of any danger, lost in the simple pleasure of exploring interesting scents. Its beautiful coat caught the sunlight, making it look like a living golden statue as it moved gracefully through the garden area. Marcus took careful aim, drawing his arm back like a pitcher preparing to throw a fastball. He had played baseball in high school and still remembered the proper technique for accuracy and power. The businessman felt a surge of anticipation as he prepared to disrupt the peaceful scene before him. In his twisted mind, this was going to be entertaining, a brief moment of excitement in an otherwise ordinary day. With a quick, practiced motion, Marcus hurled the stone directly at the golden retriever. The rock flew through the air with deadly accuracy, striking the unsuspecting animal hard on its right side, just behind the front leg. The impact made a sickening thud that echoed across the quiet park, followed immediately by a sharp yelp of pain and confusion from the injured dog. Golden Retriever stumbled sideways from the force of the blow, its legs shaking as it tried to understand what had just happened. The dog looked around wildly, its eyes wide with fear and bewilderment. It had never experienced unprovoked violence before and could not comprehend why someone would want to hurt it. The animal's tail, which had been wagging happily just moments before, now hung low between its legs. Marcus burst into loud, harsh laughter at the sight of the injured animal's distress. The sound of his amusement was cold and cruel, echoing off the surrounding houses like the cackle of a movie villain. He found the dog's pain and confusion absolutely hilarious, and he made no attempt to hide his enjoyment of the situation. This was exactly the kind of entertainment he had been hoping for. The German Shepherd immediately stopped playing and rushed to its companion's side, showing the kind of loyalty and concern that only true friends display. The larger dog circled around, the golden retriever whining softly and trying to offer comfort through gentle nudges and licks. It was clear that these two animals shared a deep bond, and the shepherd was genuinely distressed by its friend's injury and fear. Seeing the German shepherd's obvious concern for its injured companion only made Marcus laugh harder. The display of genuine emotion and loyalty between the animals struck him as ridiculous rather than touching. In his warped worldview, caring about others was a sign of weakness, and he found the dog's compassion amusing rather than admirable. Not satisfied with having hurt just one animal, Marcus began searching the ground for another suitable projectile. His first attack had been so successful and entertaining that he wanted to extend the experience. The businessman spotted another stone, this one slightly larger and more angular than the first. He picked it up and tested its weight already. Planning his second assault, the German Shepherd was still focused entirely on comforting its injured friend, making it an easy target for Marcus's next cruel act. The dog's attention was completely absorbed by concern for the golden retriever, and it had no idea that the same threat was now being directed toward it. The shepherd's protective instincts had made it vulnerable to the very danger it was trying to help its companion escape. Marcus took even more careful aim this time, wanting to ensure that his second throw would be as accurate and painful as the first. He drew his arm back slowly, savoring the anticipation of causing more suffering. The businessman felt a rush of power and control as he prepared to demonstrate his ability to hurt these defenseless creatures whenever he chose. The second stone flew through the air with even greater force than the first, striking the German Shepherd squarely on its left hip. The impact was so severe that the dog was knocked off balance, stumbling several steps before regaining its footing. A sharp cry of pain escaped from the animal's throat, a sound that would have moved any normal person to immediate regret and concern. Instead of feeling any remorse, Marcus clapped his hands together in delight at his accurate throw. He was genuinely proud of his marksmanship and the effectiveness of his attack. Both dogs were now injured and frightened, exactly the result he had been hoping to achieve. The businessman felt a sense of accomplishment, as if he had just completed a challenging and worthwhile task. Both animals were now huddled together in the center of the park, pressing close to each other for comfort and protection. They looked around nervously, trying to identify the source of their pain while simultaneously attempting to console each other. The golden retriever was favoring its injured side, while the German Shepherd kept lifting its injured hip, clearly experiencing significant discomfort. The sight of both dogs cowering together, trembling with fear and pain, filled Marcus with a satisfaction that he found deeply enjoyable. He had succeeded in transforming their peaceful afternoon into a nightmare, and he felt no guilt or concern about their suffering. In fact, Their obvious distress only increased his amusement and sense of superiority. Marcus adjusted his expensive tie and smoothed down his jacket, as if he had just completed a business presentation rather than committed an act of animal cruelty. He was breathing slightly harder from the excitement and physical exertion, but his overall appearance remained that of a successful, well-dressed professional. No casual observer would have guessed what he had just done. The businessman began walking closer to the injured animals, wanting to get a better view of the results of his handiwork. He moved slowly and deliberately, like a predator approaching wounded prey. Marcus wanted to see the fear in their eyes up close, to fully appreciate the power he held over these helpless creatures. As he approached, both dogs pressed even closer, together, instinctively recognizing him as the source of their pain, even though they had not seen him throw the stones. Animals often possess an intuitive understanding of danger that goes beyond what they can observe directly, and both dogs knew that this well-dressed human represented a serious threat to their safety. Marcus stopped about 10 feet away from the frightened animals and crossed his arms over his chest, studying them with the cold interest of a scientist observing test subjects. He was completely absorbed in examining the effects of his cruelty, noting how the dog's body language had changed from playful confidence to fearful submission. This transformation gave him a deep sense of satisfaction and control. The afternoon sun continued to shine brightly over the peaceful neighborhood, creating an ironic contrast between the beautiful setting and the ugly scene that had just unfolded. The manicured gardens and expensive homes provided a backdrop of civilization and refinement, while Marcus's actions revealed the primitive cruelty that could lurk beneath the surface of respectability. Neither of the injured dogs made any aggressive moves toward Marcus despite the pain he had caused them. Their natural gentleness and training prevented them from responding with violence, even when they were being attacked without provocation. This restraint only made Marcus feel more powerful, as he knew he could continue to hurt them without facing any immediate retaliation. Jason Statham stood at his kitchen counter, carefully measuring protein powder into a stainless steel shaker bottle. The actor had just finished an intense 2-hour workout in his home gym and was preparing his usual post-exercise recovery drink. His kitchen overlooked the small neighborhood park where he often watched Rex and Bella play during their afternoon outings. The large windows provided a perfect view of the grassy area, where his two beloved companions spent their happiest hours. At 57 years old, Jason maintained the same disciplined fitness routine that had made him famous in action movies around the world. Even though he was between film projects, he never allowed himself to become lazy or complacent about his physical condition. His daily schedule included weight training, cardio exercises, martial arts practice, and careful attention to his nutrition. This afternoon routine of preparing his protein shake was as much a part of his day as brushing his teeth. As Jason added cold water to his shaker bottle, movement in the park caught his attention through the kitchen window. He could see Rex and Bella in their usual play area, running around and enjoying the beautiful afternoon weather. Both dogs had been rescue animals when Jason adopted them 3 years ago, and watching them play freely and happily never failed to bring a smile to his face. They represented everything good about second chances and unconditional love. Rex was a magnificent golden retriever who had been abandoned at a shelter when he was barely 2 years old. His previous owners had given him up when they moved to an apartment that did not allow pets. When Jason first met Rex, the dog had been withdrawn and depressed, clearly missing the family that had left him behind. It had taken months of patient care and consistent affection before Rex began to trust again and show his naturally joyful personality. Bella was a German shepherd who had been found wandering the streets as a puppy, thin and scared but determined to survive. She had been picked up by animal control and taken to the same shelter where Rex was waiting for a home. Jason had originally planned to adopt just one dog, but when he saw how well Rex and Bella got along at the shelter, he decided to take them both. The decision had proven to be perfect, as the two dogs had become inseparable companions. Jason paused in his protein shake preparation to watch his dogs play. Rex was chasing Bella in wide circles around the park area, both of them running with the pure joy that only animals seemed capable of expressing. Their coats gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, and their movements showed the health and vitality that came from being loved and well cared for. These quiet moments of observation were some of Jason's favorite parts of each day. The actor had always been an animal lover, even during his busiest years filming action sequences around the world. Growing up in England, he had been surrounded by pets and had learned early in life that animals offered a kind of honest companionship that was rare among humans. In the entertainment industry, where relationships were often complicated by money, fame, and competition, his dogs provided a simple and pure connection that kept him grounded. Rex suddenly stopped running and began sniffing around a patch of flowers near the edge of the park. Jason smiled as he watched the dog's careful investigation of whatever scent had captured his attention. Golden retrievers were naturally curious animals, and Rex approached every new smell or sound as if it might lead to the greatest discovery in the world. This enthusiasm for life had been one of the first signs that Rex was recovering from his early abandonment. As Jason continued watching, he noticed a man in an expensive suit standing near the park area. The stranger appeared to be observing Rex and Bella, though from Jason's distance, it was difficult to determine the man's intentions. Jason felt a slight twinge of concern, as he was always protective of his dogs when they were outside. Living in Beverly Hills meant dealing with all kinds of people, and not all of them had good intentions toward animals. The well-dressed man bent down and appeared to pick something up from the ground. Jason's attention became more focused as he tried to understand what was happening. Something about the stranger's body language seemed wrong, though Jason could not immediately identify what was bothering him about the scene. His instincts, honed by years of playing characters who had to assess threats quickly, were telling him to pay closer attention. Jason set down his protein shaker and moved closer to the kitchen window, pressing his face against the glass for a better view. The distance made it difficult to see details clearly, but he could make out the man's movements as he seemed to be preparing to throw something. A cold feeling of dread began to form in Jason's stomach as he realized what might be about to happen. The stranger drew his arm back in a throwing motion, and Jason watched in growing horror as he realized the target was Rex. Time seemed to slow down as Jason saw the man's arm move forward in a throwing motion. The actor's hands pressed against the window glass as he helplessly watched the scene unfold. Too far away to intervene or even shout a warning, the projectile struck Rex with enough force to knock the dog sideways, and Jason heard his companion's cry of pain even through the closed windows of his house. The sound cut through him like a knife, triggering an immediate and overwhelming surge of protective fury. His beloved Rex, who had already suffered abandonment and neglect in his young life, was being attacked by a stranger for no apparent reason. Jason's vision seemed to narrow and focus with laser intensity on the man who had just hurt his dog. Every muscle in his body tensed as adrenaline flooded his system, preparing him for action. The actor had performed countless fight scenes in movies, but none of them had ever felt as real or as urgent as this moment. Someone had just attacked a member of his family, and every instinct he possessed was demanding immediate retaliation. Bella rushed to Rex's side, and Jason could see both dogs huddling together in fear and confusion. The sight of his two innocent companions cowering in pain and terror made Jason's anger burn even hotter. These animals trusted him to protect them, and he had failed to prevent this attack. The guilt and rage combined into an explosive mixture that demanded immediate action. The stranger was laughing at the dog's distress, apparently finding their pain entertaining rather than concerning. This display of casual cruelty pushed Jason's anger beyond the breaking point. He had dealt with many unpleasant people during his career in Hollywood, But he had never encountered someone who would hurt defenseless animals purely for their own amusement. Jason watched as the man picked up another projectile and took aim. At Bella, the actor's protective instincts overrode any consideration of consequences or legal implications. His dogs needed him, and nothing else mattered in that moment. Without another second of hesitation, Jason abandoned his protein shake and headed directly for his front door. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as Jason moved through his house with the purposeful stride of someone who had made a decision and would not be deterred from carrying it out. His years of training and discipline had prepared him for many different kinds of challenges, but none had ever felt as personal or as important as the confrontation he was about to initiate. Jason burst through his front door with the controlled intensity of a man who had reached his breaking point. His footsteps were silent on the pavement as he crossed the street, moving with the practiced stealth that had made him famous in countless action scenes. But this was not a movie, and the anger burning in his chest was completely real. Every step brought him closer to the man who had just attacked his beloved dogs for pure entertainment. Marcus was still standing over the injured animals, admiring his handiwork with the satisfaction of someone who had just completed a successful business deal. He was completely absorbed in watching Rex and Bella cower together, their beautiful coats now dusty from rolling on the ground in pain and fear. The businessman had no idea that he was being approached by someone who considered those two dogs to be family members worth protecting at any cost. The afternoon breeze carried the sound of the dogs whimpering softly to each other, and this sound made Jason's jaw clench even tighter. Rex was still favoring his injured side, while Bella kept looking around nervously for another attack. Both animals were clearly traumatized by the unprovoked violence they had experienced, and their confusion and fear were written plainly across their expressive faces. Jason moved around the edge of the park area, using the mature oak trees as cover while he positioned himself for the most effective approach. His years of martial arts training had taught him the importance of choosing the right moment and angle for any confrontation. He wanted to get close enough to prevent Marcus from running away, but he also needed to be in a position where he could protect his dogs if the situation escalated further. Marcus picked up another stone and weighed it in his palm, apparently considering whether to inflict more damage on the already injured animals. This casual consideration of additional cruelty made Jason's blood pressure spike even higher. The businessman was treating this entire situation like a game, completely indifferent to the pain and terror he was causing to innocent creatures who had done nothing to deserve such treatment. The actor took several deep breaths to center himself and maintain control over his emotions. Despite his overwhelming anger, Jason knew that losing his temper completely would not help his dogs or improve the situation. He needed to be strategic and purposeful in his approach, using his training and experience to handle this confrontation effectively. But maintaining that control was becoming more difficult with each passing second. Jason stepped out from behind the oak tree and began walking directly toward Marcus, his movement fluid and confident despite the rage burning inside him. He had learned long ago that the way a person carried themselves could communicate volumes before a single word was spoken. Right now, everything about Jason's posture and expression was sending a clear message that Marcus was about to face serious consequences for his actions. The sound of approaching footsteps finally broke through Marcus's self-absorbed enjoyment of the dog's suffering. He turned around with the expectation of seeing another wealthy neighbor who might share his amusement at the animal's distress. Instead, Marcus found himself face to face with a man whose appearance immediately triggered recognition, followed quickly by confusion and then growing concern. Jason Statham was walking toward him with the unmistakable bearing of someone who was extremely angry and completely in control of that anger. The actor's eyes were fixed on Marcus with laser-like intensity, and his expression left no doubt about his intentions. This was not going to be a friendly neighborhood conversation about the weather or property values. Marcus's confident smile began to falter as he processed what he was seeing. The famous action star was approaching him with obvious hostile intent, and Marcus was beginning to realize that this confrontation might not end in his favor. He straightened his expensive tie and tried to regain his composure, but there was something about Jason's approach that made traditional intimidation tactics seem suddenly inadequate. The distance between the two men closed steadily as Jason continued his purposeful advance. He was close enough now that Marcus could see the controlled fury in the actor's eyes, and the businessman felt his first real twinge of genuine concern. This was not the kind of situation that Marcus was accustomed to handling, and his usual methods of dealing with problems involved money and lawyers rather than physical confrontation. Jason stopped walking when he was close enough to Marcus that escape would be difficult, but far enough away to maintain tactical advantage. The positioning was deliberate and professional, the result of years spent learning how to control physical space during dangerous situations. Marcus found himself trapped between the approaching actor and the injured dogs behind him, with no clear path for retreat. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park as the two men faced each other in what had become a classic confrontation between predator and protector. Marcus represented everything that Jason despised about certain types of wealthy people who believed their money gave them permission to hurt others without consequences. Jason represented the kind of justice that Marcus had spent his entire life avoiding through privilege and manipulation. "Excuse me," Jason said, his voice cutting through the afternoon air with the kind of quiet authority that commanded immediate attention. The two words were spoken calmly, but they carried an undertone of controlled violence that made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. This was not the voice of someone who was going to be easily dismissed or intimidated. Marcus tried to summon his usual arrogant confidence, but something about Jason's presence was making that familiar swagger much more difficult to maintain. The businessman was accustomed to dealing with people who could be bought, threatened, or manipulated through social pressure. Jason Statham clearly did not fit into any of those categories, and Marcus was beginning to realize that his normal tactics might be completely useless in this situation. "Those are my dogs you just attacked," Jason continued, his voice remaining eerily calm despite the obvious fury burning behind his eyes. Each word was delivered with precision and emphasis, leaving no room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation. The actor's tone made it clear that he had witnessed everything that had happened, and that he held Marcus completely responsible for his dog's injuries and trauma. The businessman glanced quickly at Rex and Bella, who were still huddled together near the flower bed where they had been playing so peacefully just minutes earlier. Seeing the dogs' obvious fear and the way they were pressing against each other for comfort made Marcus realize for the first time that these were not random stray animals, but someone's beloved pets. More importantly, they belonged to someone who was clearly prepared to defend them. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but found that his usual smooth-talking abilities seemed to have abandoned him completely. The words that normally flowed so easily when he was manipulating customers or intimidating business rivals simply would not come. Standing face to face with Jason Statham while two injured dogs whimpered nearby had created a situation that was completely outside Marcus's experience and comfort zone. The silence stretched between the two men as Jason waited for some kind of response or explanation from Marcus. The actor's patience was clearly limited, and his body language suggested that he was prepared to take more direct action if Marcus did not provide satisfactory answers very quickly. The businessman could feel sweat beginning to form on his forehead, despite the cool afternoon breeze. Marcus cleared his throat nervously and attempted to regain some of his usual arrogance, though his voice carried none of its typical confidence. "Look, they are just dogs," he said, with a forced laugh that sounded hollow and unconvincing in the tense atmosphere. "I was just having a bit of fun. No real harm done, right?" He gestured dismissively toward Rex and Bella, as if their obvious pain and fear were merely minor inconveniences rather than the result of deliberate cruelty. Jason's expression grew even darker at Marcus's casual dismissal of what he had done. The actor took a step closer, and Marcus could see the controlled power in every movement. This was not just an angry pet owner confronting someone who had bothered his animals. This was a man who had spent years learning how to handle dangerous situations. And Marcus was rapidly becoming one of those situations that required immediate resolution. Fun, Jason repeated slowly, his voice dropping to an even more dangerous level. You think hurting innocent animals is fun? The question was delivered with the kind of quiet intensity that made Marcus wish he could disappear completely from the situation. Jason gestured toward his dogs, and Marcus could see the genuine love and concern in the actor's eyes as he looked at his injured companions. A small crowd was beginning to gather as neighbors noticed the commotion in the usually quiet park area. Several people were already recognizing Jason Statham and pulling out their phones to record whatever was happening. Marcus realized with growing horror that this confrontation was not going to remain private, and his reputation in the neighborhood was about to suffer serious damage regardless of how the situation ended. These are not just pets to me, Jason continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who was completely serious about every word he spoke. They are family. And you just attacked my family for your entertainment. The actor's tone made it clear that he considered Marcus's actions to be a personal assault rather than a simple case of animal mischief. Marcus looked around at the faces of the neighbors who had gathered to watch the confrontation. He could see nothing but disapproval and disgust in their expressions as they realized what he had done. Several people had clearly witnessed his attack on the dogs from their windows, and their body language showed that they were firmly on Jason's side. In this dispute, I want you to apologize to them, Jason said firmly, pointing toward Rex and Bella, who were still cowering together near the flower bed. Right now. Get down on your knees and apologize to the animals you hurt. His tone made it absolutely clear that this was not a request or suggestion. It was a direct command from someone who expected immediate compliance. The crowd murmured their approval of Jason's demand, and Marcus could hear several people expressing their support for making him face consequences for his cruelty. The businessman realized that every person watching this confrontation had already decided that he was completely in the wrong, and there would be no sympathy or support for his position from anyone present. Marcus felt his face burning with humiliation. As he looked around at all the people who were now recording his disgrace with their phones, he knew that by tomorrow morning, videos of this incident would probably be circulating on social media platforms around the world. His carefully constructed image as a successful and respected businessman was crumbling in real time. Reluctantly, Marcus dropped to his knees on the concrete pavement, feeling the rough surface scrape against his expensive pants. The businessman had never been forced to humble himself in such a public and degrading way, and the experience was far more difficult than he had expected. His pride was taking a beating that felt almost as painful as any physical punishment. I'm sorry, he mumbled quietly, barely audible to the people who were watching and recording his humiliation. But Jason was not satisfied with this half-hearted attempt at remorse, and the actor's expression made it clear that much more would be required before this confrontation could end. Louder, Jason commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who was accustomed to being obeyed without question. And mean it. These animals deserve a real apology. The crowd pressed closer to hear Marcus's response, and the businessman could feel the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on him. With his voice shaking slightly from both fear and humiliation, Marcus spoke louder and more clearly. I am truly sorry for hurting you both. What I did was wrong and cruel, and you did not deserve it. As he spoke these words while looking into the dog's innocent eyes, something unexpected began to happen inside Marcus's mind and heart. For the first time in many years, Marcus was experiencing genuine remorse rather than simply saying whatever words would get him out of trouble. Looking at Rex and Bella, seeing the way they trembled but showed no aggression toward him despite the pain he had caused, Marcus felt an emotion that he had not experienced since childhood. The dog's capacity for forgiveness, even after being hurt, was something completely outside his understanding of how the world worked. Jason knelt down beside his dogs and began examining them gently for serious injuries while speaking to them in soft, comforting tones that showed the depth of his love and concern. Rex and Bella immediately relaxed under their owner's touch, their tails beginning to wag weakly as they realized they were safe and protected. The contrast between Jason's gentle care and Marcus's earlier cruelty was obvious to everyone watching. "Stand up," Jason said after ensuring that his dogs were not seriously injured. When Marcus rose unsteadily to his feet, the actor continued speaking in a voice that was firm, but no longer threatening. "I want you to understand something important. These animals depend on humans for protection and care. When you hurt them for entertainment, you are not just being cruel. You are betraying the trust that all domestic animals place in human beings." The crowd began to disperse slowly as people realized that the immediate confrontation was over. But several neighbors approached Jason to check on his dogs and express their disgust at what they had witnessed. Marcus stood alone and isolated, finally beginning to understand the impact of his actions on both the animals and the community around him. As Jason gently led Rex and Bella toward his house for a more thorough examination and some well-deserved treats, Marcus remained standing in the park where his cruel entertainment had backfired so completely. The businessman who had started the afternoon, feeling superior and amused, found himself facing a very different reality. His actions had consequences, and his victims had protectors who would not stand by silently while innocent creatures suffered. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus began to question whether his approach to life was really working as well as he had always believed. The experience of being held accountable for his cruelty had been more transformative than any business success or financial achievement he had ever experienced. The seeds of genuine change had been planted, though only time would tell whether they would grow into lasting transformation or simply fade away like so many other uncomfortable moments in his privileged life.